Okay, let's go. Key? One of these keys. All right. Thank you, Chaim Shalom, for bringing the sushi and the burgers. I appreciate it. I want to dedicate our class tonight to Mr. and Mrs. Alan Gompert on Alan's birthday tonight, and Yoni Michaeli's birthday today. Year of bracha and atzlacha b'gashas ruchnis. Amen. So tonight we are going to learn about. Oh, thank you. Tonight we're going to learn about how to deal with rage, how to deal with anger. A lot of times people get angry, and they don't even know when they get angry. I heard the story today. Rabbi Cohen, he's a war veteran. He was in the Navy, I believe. Told me an amazing story. He was serving in Okinawa, and there was a Pesach Seder. They had to go from one end of the aisle to the other end. They had to walk. They come to the Pesach Seder, and a few hundred Jewish soldiers are there together. They had a Pesach Seder, and it was enjoyable, and everyone's together. And they're in the middle of the army, and they have a Pesach Seder. They had a rabbi there, and they go through the Pesach Seder, and they come up to the meal. They're up to the meal, and sees one guy has a very sad face. He's like, "What's up? Why are you so upset?" He's like, "I'm from the Bronx. Who is here from the Bronx? There's nobody here from the Bronx. No one I can connect to." So one guy behind him says, "Hey, Bronx?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "What street do you live on?" He tells him the street. He says, What's a cross street? What area in that street?" He tells him the cross street. He says, "What's your address?" He tells him the address. He says, "What apartment number are you in?" "Apartment? I'm just in this apartment." He says, "And I'm from Alabama. Put it there, partner." And it broke the ice. Everyone there, all the soldiers smiled and happy. And this guy also, like, put it there, partner. A lot of times we get upset. We don't even know why we're getting upset. And we think it's this reason, it's that reason, and it's really not. This week, we read about how Moshe Rabbeinu himself displayed anger. And we do learn about, in Pirkei Avot, we learn about how there's 4 kinds of people. Some people are easy to get angry, and they're easy to calm down. Some people are hard to get angry, hard to calm down. And the Mishnah says, the best person is the Chassid. What's the best person? It's hard to get angry, easy to calm down. But it doesn't say he never gets angry. It just says it's hard for him to get angry. It takes him a long time. He's patient, but he does get angry. So, even this parasha also, we learn about Moshe Rabbeinu. He got angry. And the Torah says, yes, people get angry. It's true. It happens. But the Torah says that there's also a price. There's a price for getting angry. We read in this parasha, Moshe Rabbeinu gets angry, and after his anger, there is a mistake. And that's the subject I wanted to learn about tonight, about anger, different causes for anger, how to deal with anger, and to look at this from different angles and to get some perspective on this. But before we do, let's understand a little bit better about exactly what happened with Moshe Rabbeinu. So we learned a few parshas ago in Parshas Balak at the end about how Balak failed to, Bilam was unable to curse the Jewish people, and he told the king of Balak, their God hates promiscuity, bring them to that sin, and their God will do the rest. And sure enough, he brings the daughters of Midian, the daughters of Moab, and they cause the Jewish men to sin. And this parasha, this Torah portion, we read about how God commands the Jewish people to take vengeance against Midian. And it's interesting, the Torah tells us to take vengeance. Where in the Torah do we find vengeance? And generally, the Torah tells us, don't take vengeance. Don't, someone does something to you, don't get back at them. It's prohibition. It's true, the Torah says don't take vengeance against your people. But the whole concept of vengeance seems like a very non-Jewish thing. And here the Torah says you have to take vengeance. So one important distinction between the war of Midian and other wars is that the people of Midian, they fought against us, was pure anti-Semitism. They had no reason to fight with us whatsoever. I mean, wars happen for different reasons. People argue about land. Countries fight about land. There's something that they want from each other. Today, there's a lot of wars about religion. People are warring you. Why don't you join our? What's the matter with you? How come you can't? And the Jewish people over here, we weren't on the border with Midian, somewhere in northern Saudi Arabia, and Iran. And here, the Midianites are coming all the way to us to fight a war with us. We weren't forcing our religion on them. We were just minding our own business. Other countries fought with us. They had a reason to fight with us, so to speak. They had some idea that we were going to ruin their lives. We were going to conquer their land. So it made sense for them to have some justification for warring against us. But Midian, they're all the way in the middle of Yehupit, so far away from us. Why are they fighting with us? It's just pure anti-Semitism. The Torah tells us that you got to cut off the head of the snake. Now, when you're dealing with such a kind of hatred, you don't try to don't offer land in exchange. Don't try to give them gifts to calm them down. Talking about pure hatred, you have to defend yourself. But I want to talk about the spiritual meaning of Midian. The spiritual meaning, the word Midian in Hebrew comes from the word machlokas, madon, argument. So the war of Moshe Rabbeinu against Midian is actually a spiritual battle against arguments and anger and discord, and that's what I want to focus on tonight. So the Torah says when the soldiers were successful in conquering Midian, they return from Midian and they bring spoils back with them. Shalom Aleichem. They bring spoils back with them. Hey, Josh. Alona, your husband's here. Baruch Hashem. Don't worry, he's only eating healthy food. So the soldiers come back. They've conquered the land. They've conquered, and they bring back spoils of war. And who do they bring back with them? They bring back with them the same daughters of Midian that the Jewish people had sinned with. So Moshe Rabbeinu is like, these are the people who brought all the problems to us. Why are you bringing them into our camp? What are you doing? And it says Moshe Rabbeinu got angry. And Rashi says because he got angry, he made a mistake. And it's interesting, Rashi points out to 3 mistakes all of a sudden in this week's Torah portion, which had to do with Moshe Rabbeinu getting angry. Moshe Rabbeinu got angry, as we learned a few weeks ago, about Moshe Rabbeinu hitting the rock. He got angry, and that's why he hit the rock. And Moshe Rabbeinu also got angry at Aaron after his 2 sons had died because Aaron made a mistake. He thought he made a mistake about how the process should be with the sacrifices. But Rashi doesn't comment in the Torah portions before. Rashi waits to comment over here and tells us here that Moshe Rabbeinu made all those mistakes before because of anger. Why does he wait till here? So because the other Torah portions, you could interpret them in a way that Moshe Rabbeinu did not make a mistake. Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to one rock, that rock didn't respond, so Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to a different rock, and then he had once been told by God to hit the rock, so you can't really know for sure if it's because of anger. Then the next Torah portion also, you can't know for sure it was a subtle mistake, but in this Torah portion, there's such an obvious mistake that Moshe makes that every yeshiva bacher knows, every yeshiva boy knows this law, that from here we learn that all the other things that Moshe Rabbeinu did were also because of anger and brought into mistake. Sometimes you make a mistake in life, and you don't know what the cause of it. You attribute this to that, to different causes. But sometimes you make such an obvious mistake in your life, and it forces you to change gears and to go have a different direction. So this is something which is so obvious that the Torah says that it must have been because of Moshe's anger. What was the mistake? The mistake was like this. When they brought back the spoils, so that Moshe Rabbeinu did not tell them how to kosher them. Elazar, Kohen Gadol, the Torah report says clearly, Elazar interrupts the conversation between Moshe Rabbeinu and the soldiers and says, Moshe Rabbeinu, 1 second, don't we have to kosher these things before we use them? And like, well, 1 second. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't know this. Moshe Rabbeinu is like some rabbi who one of his students knows more than him. Moshe Rabbeinu he's called Rabbeinu, our teacher. And here he makes this obvious mistake. What's going on? So that's Rashi says this had to do with his anger. Now, question is, first of all, before we get into negative anger, let's try to figure out everything God made is also for a positive purpose as well. So is there any time that's justified, and you're supposed to, and it's a mitzvah, in fact, to get angry. There's a very interesting expression from Benu Yonah. Benu Yonah says, "Al tia matok pen yivlaucha." Don't be too sweet, because it may get swallowed up. You're dealing with someone in business, and sometimes the person you're dealing with isn't as honest as he could be. You gotta, hey, what's going on? You gotta speak up for yourself. They'll swallow you alive. Your son comes home and he has just done something he really shouldn't be doing in school. He broke down a wall in school. He attached his teacher to her seat with some crazy glue. Whatever your son has done, what are you supposed to do? He comes home and he's supposed to get a mazel tov and a hug and a kiss and a raise in his allowance. What's the reaction supposed to be? A parent is supposed to be there and also give, when need to be, words of reprimand and strength that the child needs to hear. The child needs to have the borders. So the Rambam phrases it this way. The Rambam says that in regards to anger, he says a person should not be full of anger, shouldn't be emotional, shouldn't be swept away by his emotions. He says you should only get angry at something that's very big, first of all. And then he says, and this anger should only be between you, should only be the way you express yourself, but not the way you actually feel. It shouldn't be something that you're actually caught into, you're drawn into. It shouldn't be that you have been swept away by your anger. It may be necessary for you to say a stronger word to give over the message to your child. Maybe necessary. Parents, by the way, generally make the mistake on the side of anger. So chances are, if you're not sure which way to go, chances are that what needs to happen is more kindness. But let's say what needs to happen is some words of reprimand. Let's say that's what's going on. Let's say it's correct. But still, even then, where are you? Are you swept away with it? Are you actually angry? Or are you just doing this solely for the sake of your child, that they need to hear this? This is what they need to hear. Is it about you or is it about them? One litmus test to tell the difference is the words you're using. Are you using words, are you insulting your child? Are you saying words that about their actions? Are you talking to them? And you know, everyone has something that makes them explode. Everyone has something that you say to them, and then that touches their button, and they go. So when you get angry at somebody, you go right for the jugular vein. There's something, this guy always if I call him an egotistical person, I always knew you were egotistical. When I met you the first time, I could tell you're egotistical. I didn't say it to you till now. Why? Because I got angry now. But I'm only telling it to you now because I get angry. So when you get angry, you want to go after the person. So the Torah is telling us, don't get angry. One litmus test to tell if you've gone over that border or not is how are you speaking to the person? Are you using the words that person needs to hear, or the words that you want to say? That's just an aside. But what I really want to talk about tonight is not about anger that's warranted. You're supposed to have that is a mitzvah to have and necessary. I want to talk about the more common one that we all deal with, and that is anger you're not supposed to have. But before I do, I just want to point out how relevant this is to everything that goes on in our life on a daily basis. All of us have things that happen to us that we don't like them, we're not happy with. And the question is, how do we view them? Somebody a few days ago crashed into my car. I can't say I was guilty at all, Baruch Hashem, because I was parked and it wasn't inside the car. And it didn't bother me at all because insurance was covering it. So that was an easier one. But sometimes someone is irresponsible. They're on their phone. They're texting. They crash into your car. And what's your reaction? Do you look at it as this person has done something to you? This person is one who's done it to you, and they're responsible? Or do you say that God did it to you? What's really happened? Even if you say that this person is a messenger of God, okay, he's a messenger of God, but then isn't he also mixed into the story too? He decided to drive 120 miles an hour on the 30-mile-an-hour street, and what was supposed to happen? This is all part of God's plan. Isn't he have something? Isn't he part of the story as well? So there's an interesting. The question basically is: you look at the guy, you look at the stick, or you look at the person holding the stick, and what's a true way of looking at this? So there's actually a bit of a argument between Orach Chaim HaKadosh, who was Yartzev just a few days ago in Tesvav Tammuz, and the Sefer Chinuch and the Alter Rebbe. On the one hand, we have the Alter Rebbe and the Sefer Chinuch. On the other hand, we have the Zalmi, Shalom Aleichem. On the other hand, we have Orach Chaim HaKadosh. Orach Chaim HaKadosh says that if something happens to you, someone does something to you, they have free will. And because they have free will, they're also part of the story. And they can do something to you. And it brings a proof, interesting proof from the Torah. He says, on that night in Shechem, that fateful night, when the brothers of Yosef plotting to kill Yosef. So they're there, they're all ready to kill him, and they have all kinds of they're ready to kill him. There are different ways to kill someone. Reuven says, you know what, guys? I have an idea. Let's not kill Yosef. You know what we're going to do instead of killing Yosef? I have an idea. You know what we're going to do? We're going to throw Yosef into a pit of scorpions. That's what we're going to do. Throw us in a pit of scorpions. Like, that's a kind way of killing him. He said, let's not kill him. Let's throw him into the pit. The pit's full of scorpions. Why is that a kinder way of killing him? So Rav Chaim HaKadosh said like this, unbelievable. He says, the brothers of Yosef, what they were thinking was that Yosef was liable to the death penalty. Yosef had told their father different things that they had done, and Yosef was their father, according to the information, the misinformation in their opinion, that Yosef was telling their father would be obligated, according to Torah, to kill them. And this was misinformation, and so they had to defend themselves, in their opinion, by killing Yosef. That's what they were thinking. So Reuven says to them, guys, listen, we might be right, we might be wrong, but I have an idea. We have free will. We have free will. Since we have free will, so we might make a mistake. So because we might make a mistake, I have an idea. Let's throw Yosef into a pit of scorpions. Animals do not have free will. Insects don't have free will. Throw him into a pit of scorpions. If he's supposed to die, he'll die. Wow. It sounds like the Salem witch hunt, but it was different. I'll tell you why. Lahavdil. Because Orach Chaim HaKadosh, one who wrote these words himself, he had this experience himself. He was once with a caravan in the desert, famous story, the Rebbe writes a story, and he was somehow, I don't know the details, but basically he was without the caravan, he was stuck in the desert, and a lion came to him, and a lion crouched in front of him, and he sat on the lion brought him to safety. So he himself was, I think there's actually more than one story, the Orach Chaim, and the other tzaddikim, Chaim Shav Azariah, and it says in the Torah that a person who has the image of God upon them, animals are afraid of them. So Yosef at tzaddik, he's our brother, he's a tzaddik, so for sure, if he's not meant to die, I mean, any of us, animals will never start up with us, so Yosef, if he's like us, he'll be safe in the scorpion pit.
But they didn't think it was a tzaddik.
Just in case he's a tzaddik, he'll be okay. We don't want to kill him with our hands because maybe we're wrong. But the scorpions, they have no free will. If God wants them to die, they'll die. Another proof to Orach Chaim. I know that Orach Chaim himself brings this proof. The Rebbe mentions this. It says in Gemara Chagiga, a very strange story. Apparently, angel of death isn't just a individual. Apparently, there's a whole group of angels, part of his unit. Angel of death people. Death squad. So angel of death, Gemara says a story. Angel of death sends somebody to go kill Miriam. Miriam with the long hair. Okay. Man goes, the angel goes, and he brings back instead some other Miriam. Miriam who grows hair, Miriam who grows a lot of children, and she's young, and instead of bringing the older, Miriam was supposed to have passed away. I don't know why she's supposed to pass away. It was how old she was, if what she had done wrong, if she hadn't done anything wrong, just her time. Either way, he got the wrong person. So the angel, that's like, what'd you do? This is the wrong ID. How'd you bring this lady? This is the wrong one. And then the angel of death says, "But second, how could you have brought this lady? There's rules in the world. If she wasn't meant to go, how'd you bring her?" So the angel responds, well, she had a bad mazel today. She dropped a pot of something on top of her, and because she had bad mazel, I was able to take her. So it sounds like from the story, it sounds like that people have free will and things can happen and there are mess ups, and it's not only by God's hand, and God entrusts people and God entrusts angels, and it doesn't happen always the way that we would expect things to happen if everything's by divine providence. That's what the Orach Chaim says. How does the Alter Rebbe respond to that? What does the Alter Rebbe say first? Let me tell you what the Alter Rebbe says. The Alter Rebbe says like this. Before I tell you what the Alter Rebbe says, I want to give a plug to everyone here to learn this yourself, not just once, not just twice. Learn it really well in a way that stays with you. And whenever you feel yourself getting angry, the Rebbe writes, thinking about this, before it gets to the stage of rage, just in your mind, when it's still in your mind, it's still intellectual, like, why is this guy doing this? Why did this happen? Before he gets to the stage of, remember what it says in these words of Tanya, this advice Rebbe says to deal with rage. What does it say in Tanya? Tanya, it says that if it says in Tanya, quotes the Gemara says, anyone who gets angry, it's like serving idols. Why like serving idols? So in Tanya, he says a very simple reason. Because when you're getting angry, you lose your faith in God. Because you don't believe what's happening to you is by God's hand. You think there's a human being who's cursing you. There's a human being who's hitting you. There's a human being who's damaging your finances. And that's why you're getting upset. But if you would believe, hey, Shalom, you got a shout out too. If you would believe that God is the one doing it to you, it's not the human being doing it to you, it's God doing it to you, then you wouldn't get angry at all.
You get angry at God.
Yeah. You know that what's happening to you is by God's hand, and God is absolutely good, and God is good and does good, and therefore this is happening. If God's doing it, you're not getting angry. What does this person have to do with anything? This person is just a shliach, just an emissary. Now, one second, what happens in the court of law? So Rachaim HaKadosh, actually the Sefer HaChinuch, the way he phrases it is, well, it's not really his fault, it was meant to happen. The Alter Rebbe doesn't write it that way. He says that guy's going to get punished. They'll get punished by a heavenly court, they'll get punished by human court. Well, what does that matter to you? A dog comes and bites you. So you call the 311 and they take the dog to the pound. Whatever, they call the Sanhedrin and whatever happens to the dog is irrelevant. That's not relevant what happens to the dog. You got bitten by a dog. So why did it happen to you? It happened to you because it was by divine providence.
God is teaching you.
There's something happening by divine providence, and if it's happening by God's hand, it must be that it's good for me. If it's happening by God's hand, it must be that it's good for me. Yes, it's true that person will get punished for choosing to be to do a mission that she shouldn't be doing. That's true. But what's happening to me is something that's good for me because it's happening by God's hand. Human being can control me. So how does Alter Rebbe deal with the Gemara and Chagiga and the story with Yosef and his brothers? So, Colin, wow, I haven't seen you since that ride you gave me from Crown Heights to Worcester, Massachusetts. All right, so the way the Rebbe addresses the Orach Chaim, and the Rebbe says like this: there's something called a time of danger. When there's a time of danger, so then you're judged in a more stricter way. Meaning, if a person has, let's say, a sin that wouldn't warrant such a great punishment, but in addition to that being incriminated for whatever he's done, he's now in a time of danger. That says the Satan accuses us at a time of danger. So both of those things together can make something happen. So because Yosef's brothers had free will, because in addition to their free will, there's also some kind of lighter mistake on the level of Yosef HaTzadik. Because of that, they could do something. Or like it says about Binyamin, that Yaakov did not want to send Binyamin with his brothers because maybe something will happen. Why? Because he said that the Satan accuses a time of danger. So the point is, no human being can do anything to you unless it happens by Hashem's hand. And yes, a Jew has some potency in his actions more than other things because God gave us free will. But that only works if it's something that's already been decided in the heavenly court that the person's actions warrant some kind of divine response and cleansing. The bottom line is that it's not the Sefer HaChinuch. Alter Rebbe telling us it's not the stick; it's the one holding the stick. Don't pay attention to the stick. The Sefer HaChasidim is an amazing story that there was a guy who had a son, and before he passes away, he tells his son like this: "He's my son. Whenever you get angry, promise me you won't do anything about it until the next day. Okay? Wait a day." That's what he told him then. Count to 10, count to 1,000,000. Wait at least a day. So he says an amazing story. This guy, he got married, and he had to go on business for a couple of years somewhere. He comes back. He comes back to his house middle of the night. He's gone away for 4 or 5 years. And he's gotten letters from his wife: "I miss you, come back home." So he came back home. Comes back home, he hears his wife talking to some young man over there. He's so upset. He's ready to go in there and kill them both together. But he remembered what his father said. So he sat down over there in a chair outside his own house, and he slept outside. Morning, knocks on the door. "Oh, I'm so happy to see you. Welcome back home. I miss you so much. Where have you been?" "Where have I been? Who was here last night?" "I mean, who was here last night?" "Who was here? I heard you talking to somebody last night." "A young man was here." "What are you talking about, young man?" "There's somebody here last night. I heard you talk." He says, "You don't recognize Shlomi? Shlomi, it's your son." He didn't recognize his own son. It's been a couple of years. He got a little beard. He's a little older. He didn't recognize his own son. He says, "Thank God my father told this to me. If I wouldn't have listened to this, I wouldn't have had a son." The Rebbe told a friend of mine similar advice to wait. Wait before responding. Wait a minute before responding. Rebbe also told him to study concepts in Chassidus that soften your midas, about divine providence, that soften your character. There's one powerful idea from the Rambam. I thought this was very powerful. I want to share it with you. The Rambam says that if God can create an eye, in order to create something, you have to be able to know what it is. In other words, in order to create an eye, you have to be able to be the eye itself also. You can't create something without knowing. I was just at Nathaniel Harkham's just made tonight going to move into Eretz Yisrael. He made an event where he's selling his artwork. In order to make this artwork, you have to picture something. You have to know something. You have to be able to have some kind of vision. So, in this passage of Maimonides, Rebbe quotes, he says that if God created an eye, He also has to see us at least as well as a human eye. At least as well as a human eye. You have to realize that God is always watching you, at least as well as a human can, and that makes you, puts things in check. One more important advice that the Rebbe tells people, which this is very powerful. Try this out; it'll work. It's going to work. This is what it is. Ask forgiveness. You have to, according to halacha anyway. You have to ask forgiveness to the person you slighted. Thank you. You have to when you know you're going to have to ask forgiveness. It's very hard to ask for forgiveness. When you know that you're going to have to ask for forgiveness, Avram Shol, Shalom Aleichem, oh Ashkan, wah. If when you know you have to ask forgiveness from somebody, you're not going to want to do it in the first place. Because you have to ask forgiveness from somebody, you're not going to get angry. So the Rebbe says that good advice for how to deal with anger is ask forgiveness from that person the next day. Take responsibility. It's not just the right thing to do anyways. It says in the Code of Jewish law. Oh, one more thing, a very important thing the Rebbe says is, and this is really important, things don't disappear in a day. Step by step. The person suffering with an anger issue, don't get angry at yourself because which leads to more anger. Things take time, step by step. I'm going to conclude with one story, amazing story. You have to read this yourself. I'm going to ruin it by telling it to you. I just only want to tell it to you to whet your appetite so you read it yourself and get the full flavor of it. I haven't read it in a long time. It was an amazing story. The previous Rebbe has a book called Memoirs. And in this book he writes about events that happened before the time of the Alter, before the time of the Baal Shem Tov. He writes about a Melamed, a school teacher. His name was Reb Nissen. Reb Nissen had they say everyone has shoes except for the shoemaker, right? So he was a very tremendous teacher, and he raised his students in an amazing way. But his own son Yitzchak Shaul had a problem. What was his problem? His problem was he was very cruel to animals. He used to do crazy stuff. The previous Rebbe writes how he used to tie cat tails to each other and make them go, and really very mean to animals and bring ants to spiders and all kinds of horrible things. So his father once noticed this, and his father never ever spanked him or spanked the children in his class. He had what they called a cat of nine tails on the wall, and he would point to it whenever things got really rowdy in his class. Just point to it, and that'll be enough. But he said to himself, and he said to his son, "I have to do this to you. Just so you should be able to feel the pain of the animals. You shouldn't do this again." And he spanked him. And then he studied with him the Gemara, which talks about how to feed the animals before you feed yourself. Before you eat, you have to feed your animals. And then his son heard his father in his room crying and crying and crying. He was crying about how he had to express anger, and he had to do that. And that is what changed his son. More than the Gemara, and more than the words he told him, it was of seeing how his father really was bothered by his own. So the bottom line is, what we should take away from tonight is that, number one, whatever happens to you is by divine providence. Nothing happens by accident. And if something's happening to you, it's by divine providence. And even though a human being is doing it to you, and he shouldn't be doing it to you, it's also by divine providence. The example I've got to mention, the Alter Rebbe gives, is about David HaMelech. David HaMelech's own son rebelled against him. And he runs away from his son. And he runs away from Yerushalayim. You know, just how is it in politics? When you're on top, everybody bows to you. When you're on bottom, everybody spits at you. David HaMelech was down, and the head of the Sanhedrin, Shimon ben Gera, comes out, and he starts cursing David. David is not enough that his son is against him. The head of the Sanhedrin is cursing him. And his men wanted to take care of him. Take care of him means?
Kill him.
Kill him. David HaMelech said, God told him to say this to me. I mean, God told him. It was a sin. It was a wrong. It was a mistake. And in fact, later on, the Torah says how he received retribution for what he did. But David said, if he's doing this to me, it's not him. It's by God's hand. And that's how you have to feel whenever something's happening to you. You have to say to yourself, it's not the human being doing it to me. It's by God's hand. And it's for a reason. And therefore, it must be good for me. It must be something that's positive for me. That's number one. Number two is, I've got to mention, this is really important. Don't talk. Don't talk. Rambam, contrary to what psychologists and psychiatrists will say to you, some of them know this, most of them don't, that by speaking out your anger, it makes it worse. You're not letting out your anger, you're building it up so that the next time it will really be big. Instead, be quiet until the anger subsides. So wait till you respond. Don't respond right away. Think about how everything's by divine providence. Wait to respond, and most importantly, if you do get angry, ask for forgiveness. That itself will make you not want to get angry the next time. And that's what I wanted to share tonight. Anyone have any questions, comments, criticism, tomato? Yes, sir.
Someone once told me that all of you, or just the Tahanis, especially have more anger issues. Is that something that's
The Gemara mentions that, but the important thing is not whether you're a Kohen or a Levi or you're born with the nature of anger. The important thing is that whatever situation you're in, you're given the ability to do the right thing. There's no
better excuse?
There's a price. There's a price for making this mistake. There's a price. So it's better to do. If you're in that situation, there's no question that you have the ability to withstand it. And there's no such. People use the expression, "He made me angry." It's false. It's false. There's no such thing as making you angry. You decide how you want to react. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist. All right.